record on this? There it is. Okay, now we're recording. My husband's trying to get me to remember. Um, so in almost every medium, you do a lay-in, meaning that you want to cover the white of the panel or board, or you want to cover whatever color the board is. In this case, it's white. So that you get all your color approximations in place, and then your judgment isn't affected by the white of the board. And then from there, even if your color mixes aren't exactly correct, or even if they're very, very off, you can start to make corrections. So here I have my, and I had you make two because if we have two of these printouts, we can mix paint and actually match it by painting it onto one of the printouts. And then you have another printout that you can work from. It may not be entirely necessary, but you know. So I'm going to switch the camera and I'm going to trim out my board. I have an 15 by 20 inch board here because often you can buy illustration board in this size. And we can fit two of these 8.5 by 11 inch images onto one board, but I don't have room. I don't have room to fit this board very well in my space where the camera sees. And so I'm going to cut mine in half. So I'm going to switch cameras now. Did I lose Lauren?
I think she's there.
I don't see her. I don't see her and she's not in my, let's see if she would be more or less on her end if she lost me. I'm going to go ahead and switch cameras. Hopefully she can rejoin. Oops, not that. No, there we go. I went away there for a minute. Okay. Switching to my other camera here. There we are. There we go. Yay. Okay, so now I can see what you guys are seeing. And I did, now why? I did get more lights. And I'm not sure why it doesn't look to me as though the lights are helping here. It just looks like a really dim image still to me, which is frustrating. Okay. Wait, what happened? And we still don't have Lauren, so I'm not sure what's going on with that. So this is my, why is this so dark? That's something I'm going to have to play with because I just tested this thing out. Is it my camera? And I'm going to cut this thing in half. So I have a ruler here. I've ruled out, I've already made marks of 10 inches. So I'm cutting it in half lengthwise, right? To make two 10 by 15 inch pieces. And I've got a ruler here that has a steel edge. You can use a steel ruler or a ruler that, like this is plastic, but it has a steel edge for cutting. And I'm grabbing my X-Acto knife. It's like a number 10. You can use this or you can use a mat knife. So if you haven't cut and trimmed a board, that's what I'm going to do here. You may have space where you can just, fit your bigger board into your space, but this is going to be easier for the Zoom format. I'm very disturbed by how dark this image is, and I'm going to have to figure that out. Because it was, when I tested it, okay, here we go. Hang on, Emily just texted me. Okay, so her computer stopped working. So I'm
Uh-oh.
not the only one with problems. I'm not the only one with technical problems. And
Yep.
now I have lighting problems. I'm not happy because we actually did buy some bulbs that were 30% lighter, they said. And they seemed to be lighter when I tested it. And right now it just looks very dim and I'm cranky about it. Oh, all right, so now I've cut my board. More pass.
What size did you cut it to?
I could just cut it in half lengthwise, so I cut it to 15 by 10. So I
Okay.
cut the 20-inch length in half. And come on, honey, there we go. And I have a cutting mat on my desktop for this purpose, but you can also use a piece of scrap mat boards to put underneath. God, this is dark. It makes me happy. Oh, here we go. Wait. Oh, she's going to be watching on her iPhone. So that's going to be hard to see, but let's see. I admitted her, so okay. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this, well, I'm going to leave this here for a moment, and I'm going to trace my photo. Hey, are you going to be able to see on that? Hopefully, as much as you can, right? Right. So Lauren, do you have a sound?
Um,
There you go.
okay.
Okay.
Now
So
you're on my cell phone.
what I did while you were otherwise detained is I cut my 15 by 20-inch piece of mat board in half. And I cut it so that it's 10 inches by 15 inches. So I cut the 20-inch dimension down to 10. That just makes it easier for me to work on this piece because I don't have space here otherwise. Um, so now I'm going to trace my tulips. I think one of the reasons why this looks so dark is because I had a piece of mat board. I'm going to use this. Maybe this is going to bounce some more light. So there's another piece of mat board I put underneath this just for the time being. But yeah, I feel like my picture's really dark and I'm going to have to fix that. Because we did go out, we got new bulbs and it should have made things brighter. So it's a work in progress. All right, so I'm going to I'm going to tape this down. I have some Scotch tape here. I'm just going to tape this down so it doesn't move around while I'm tracing. And I've got a piece of tracing paper here. And you can buy tracing paper in rolls or you can buy it in pads. And I have a roll of it. But I don't use it as much as I used to. All right, so now I'm going to just trace my image. And you don't have to be too slavish because what happens is we're going to lose some of the design if we go into too much detail on the trace. We're going to lose that detail when we start painting and mixing color. So being too detail oriented about too many different small shapes and worrying too much about exact contours. I know it's our nature, it's my nature too. Becomes a little bit of a lost effort. And you can, in fact, just trace the big shapes if you feel confident about drawing things in. And you will eventually have to probably do a certain amount of drawing in from your reference when you start painting. So you lose your drawing eventually when you start painting. And I've definitely learned this over and over if I've gotten too slavish and detailed in my transfer. So I'm going, you know, as fast as I can here, tracing this. It's also, you know, this isn't a portrait. It doesn't have to look like anybody. So it's not so important that it's exact either. And that's true of landscapes too. You have a certain license with a landscape. And I teach a portraiture class at OSA. It's an in-person class. And one of my students this term is a landscape painter, and she goes, "Oh God, you know, with landscape I can just move stuff around." I said, "I know." Because, you know, unless it's supposed to absolutely be a particular landscape and really needs to hew to that, you have a lot of license. Okay. So now I can pick this up and go, did I get everything that I wanted to get? Right. And I haven't drawn very dark. I think you can kind of see it, right? It's just in pencil, not necessarily very dark. Oh, but another thing that I'm going to do here. So I'm lining up my drawing again with the photo. And I'm just going to put in a freehand indication of the outside contours of my image. Now, I don't always do this if it's not important, right? I don't necessarily do this, but I'm just doing it now so that we have a shape, an outside shape that contains the drawing. So there you can kind of see, I'll move this. You can see my drawing. All right. So now I'm going to take this off of here. There we go. And I'm going to fold this top edge. I have a big border here, and I want to put my image in the middle of this board, but I want to tape this tissue paper to the board. I can do it two ways. I can do it like this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to fold the top edge over the edge of the board. Like that. Now I'm going to tape it in place because I don't actually want this to move around too much. Just going to put a couple pieces of tape here. All right. Now I basically have an overlay onto my board. I know, Lauren, are you peering at your phone?
Yeah.
All right, so now I'm taking my transfer sheet, my beautiful, beautiful transfer sheet. Make sure that the side that has the graphite is going to be down, facing down. My transfer sheet's bigger than my image by far, but it doesn't matter too much. Lay it down under there. Flatten it down. All right. So I usually use a ballpoint pen for this. The advantage of this is that I can tell the difference between my pencil strokes and my pen. I can bear down on the pen without breaking the lead. If I was using a pencil, I might break the lead. And I can see where I've been because I can see the pen marks. Get this pen rolling. There we go. We also used to use what we called burnishers. They were actually a tool that you used to press. But the problem with the burnisher is that you couldn't see where you had been. So I'm going to go ahead and freehand this outside with my ballpoint pen. And I'm going to look under here, and yeah, it's making a mark, so that's good. I'm good. Here. There we go. Not too worried about it being straight, not using a ruler. And now I'm going to trace over my lines. And again, I'm not super worried. Because I'm going to have to do some drawing. I'm going to have to do some correcting. This is really so that you get the basic shapes. Come on, honey. There we go. Sorry, talking to my pen. So that you get the basic shapes placed where you want them in about the right sizes and shapes. And all of the smaller detail stuff, you're going to ultimately have to put in as you're painting. So we're doing this on this piece, and on subsequent pieces you can do as Lauren did, and you'll be able to do this at home without me necessarily doing it on camera. There we go. Not a big deal if you have to make a couple strokes. None of that's a big deal. You can check underneath and see that I'm getting a decent transfer. And it doesn't have to be that dark. You just have to be able to see the you know, the gist of it. In fact, if it's too dark, it can be a little problem in terms of covering it up. And if there's too much charcoal dust or graphite dust, it can mix in with your paint, but, you know, and be a small problem, but it's not really a big problem, but, you know. Go. One. All right. So I'm about done with my tracing. Take this off, and I just fold these up. And I have a stack of them on one of my shelves under a paperweight. There we go. So, you know, bring this up here. You can kind of see my transfer. There's my transfer. And I can bring this camera, I can zoom in here. Let's see, let me get the image lined up. Let's see, am I doing that? Am I losing light doing that? Okay, zoom back. There. So that's one of the advantages of this camera. Well, I'm not happy with the amount of light it's grabbing. I can zoom with it in this way. So move it over here. All right. So I'm going to, so I still have this attached, this tracing paper. And you can take this off, or you can just fold it behind. Now, one of the nice things about if you fold it behind, is that, say you're doing something where you're concerned about the shapes being accurate, you're in the middle of your painting, and you're trying to figure out, you know, there's an area that's giving you trouble, and you're wondering if you've gotten way off base from your reference, if it's important, right? Then you can, in the middle of painting, go, oh, look, I can just bring this back here and see where I've been going wrong over here, or wherever your problem is. So that's one of the nice things about leaving this attached. And even if you take it off, I have retrieved it from wherever I've put it in the past on a painting. And I've placed it over and kind of lined things up as well as I can. And then I start to see where I've gone wrong. So if it's a portrait, something like that, then you can use this as a tool to make corrections if you're getting frustrated. Meanwhile, I'm just going to do this right now, folding it back underneath. And now I've got this. So I'm going to move over here. I'm going to zoom out. Come on, there we go. There. So I have more space. And I'm going to I'm putting my ruler away, putting my pen away, putting my pencil away, because I only have so much room here. I'm going to put my phone. Well, I have you both here right now, so I'm just sticking my phone over there. And I want to have my palette here so you can see some of what I'm doing. So I want to set up my space to paint. Here, move you over, move you over, move all my junk over. All right. And I'll have my photo someplace where I can look at it. And we're going to talk about color mixing to some extent. Now, this piece doesn't have the variety of color as, for instance, the Black Lady piece. But I just wanted to help you get your feet wet with something that isn't as complicated and isn't going to take that as much time as a more complicated piece. So I'm still kind of lining myself up here so that you can hopefully see my palette somewhat. I have my bucket of water here, putting it there. And grabbing my palette off the ground where I put it. All right. So I still have some of the paint that we used last week on my palette. And picking up my brushes, my brush holder. I'm going to plop my brush holder here for the moment. Plonk. There. So I already did this and I recommend it, but I'm going to lay out a little bit more paint onto my palette because I took my palette, which had all these dried paint puddles, right? And all this paint had dried. And I'm cheap. I don't really like to throw away paint more than I have to. And so I took this over to the sink and it was all dried and I held it under cool water and I just agitated off all of these puddles into the water, right? And it rinsed off these piles, which some of them washed away and some of them didn't. And some of them got hard, like little rocks, and then they crumble, right? So it depends on the color. For instance, burnt umber has that tendency because it's an earth color. It'll dry and be turned into like little rocks and then it just crumbles. But other colors have different consistencies. So cadmium red, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow stuck with me, right? I've got a little bit of ultramarine blue and I've got a little bit of phthalo and I've got this is Windsor violet. So I'm going to put out some more color. I might add some color to particularly, we're using particularly greens and particularly reds and yellows in this. Well, that pretty much covers it. So, I mean, it doesn't look as though there are that many colors in this piece, but it's still going to use our primaries. And we might not need pinks as much. But we'll need primaries. So what do I have here? You guys don't have Windsor green, right?
I got some.
It's a phthalo green.
Yeah, I was wondering,
I don't, was that one on the list?
It was not.
Okay.
And now I put it on, it's an optional color.
Okay.
It's a bluish green. It's a blue
Okay.
green.
Like,
And so if you wanted to buy it, you could buy it on, and it is a great color to have. It's a great
is it,
color to have. If you wanted to buy it, you can get it on Blick on M. Graham paints. They have a phthalo green. It needs to be very dark green. So their phthalo green on M. Graham line is a good candidate. Windsor green, they discontinued it, which was
oh,
sad. And you know,
what would, so like I have a bunch of other like random gouache colors. What would be a good replace? Like I have Viridian. I have,
Viridian is a good replacement.
okay.
So layout Viridian, it's not as intense and powerful, but that doesn't matter today.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and lay out some Viridian myself. I have a tube of it here. Viridian's perfect.
One of my favorite colors.
Yeah. So it's also not quite as dark as phthalo green.
Okay.
So phthalo green is darker in value. So phthalo green can really make a nice dark tone. So I'm going to put these both out. I just wish I had better color coming in here. There. So I've got Windsor green or phthalo green, and then I've got Viridian, not quite as dark. I'm going to leave the yellow. So what I did then, I'm going to put out some perline because perlines, you guys have perline maroon. So perline maroon could mix well with phthalo green or with Viridian to make a dark. I'm going to leave the perline violet right now because I want to stick mostly with colors that you have. So after I rinsed this off, I let it dry because I did it yesterday. And this morning I took a brush, you know, I have this 1-inch, where are we? 1-inch brush. And I dipped it in my water and I basically just put a drop of it on my dried paint. Like each pile of dried paint, I just put a drop or two on there. And it's been sitting while we did what we were doing. And so now the downside to doing this is that you've added water. So it's dried paint. You let it sit, it'll soften the paint. And you can use the paint again. But if you want to have really thicker paint in your lay-in, then it's a problem because now you've got kind of this dried bunch of paint and the water on top. The longer it sits, the softer the paint will get. And then it starts to be more like using the paint from the tube. And I do this all the time. But sometimes when I'm doing a lay-in like we're going to do, and I want to have stronger, more opaque paint from the tube, then I'll put more paint out from the tube. But this especially works well when you're doing work, detail work, when you don't need a lot of paint. Maybe you can use transparent paint and you're painting over other areas, which I'm going to show you how to do. But that's what I did this morning. And now I'm just going to see how it goes. And I might add some paint from my tubes if I need to. All right, so now I've got this, it's basically about a 1/4-inch little flat brush. And I've got my 1-inch, and I've got some other brushes like this of different widths. So I've got some other flats. And you can also use rounds, but I like to cover ground. Let me grab a round. So I've got a bigger round here. This is whatever it is. They're not consistent. This is a 6, but they're not consistently sized. All right. So for the round, I can use it for the leaf tips and things where I want to not have a squared off brush. But the fact is that I can also use my flat brush sideways for those things, right? And so I can get a lot done with a flat brush. So if you have your photo, then you can mix a color on your palette and you can test it onto your photo itself. I taught the veterans a lot of this because many of them don't have any art background at all and no color background. And I've taught them somewhat to hold, you mix the paint and you hold it. You can hold it against, so that you can see it up against the photo, and you can see whether it matches. But you can also paint it onto the photo too. And because gouache shifts in color, then putting a mark onto your photo to see if you've got about the right mixture is probably the best bet. I think with the veterans, I was using acrylic, so it was a different deal. Okay, so now I'm going to look at my greens here. And one thing you can do in gouache, because it's opaque, it's not transparent watercolor, and so I can put in an entire area of green, and then I can go in and I can layer over it. And I can use opaque paint and layer over it the way I want to. So, and there isn't necessarily a single order of the way to do things. I don't necessarily have to go with darks first. I don't necessarily have to go with lights first, because it's opaque. So one thing I'm going to do first, though, is I'm going to mix a dark. I've decided I'm going to mix a dark. So we're going to go at this a little bit like a watercolor, a transparent watercolor. I've got my perline violet, and I wish you could see the color a little bit better. And I'm going to use Viridian to mix it into this, to make a dark. I'm sorry, this is perline maroon, because I didn't even put the violet out. So this makes a dark neutral. And you can make it, if you add more perline maroon, you can make it warmer. But if you add more Viridian, you can make it cooler. And so with this and my squared off brush, I'm going to go ahead and draw in some of these dark areas. And that helps give my painting some structure. And again, because I am able to paint over things with opaque paint, I'm not too worried. I don't feel like I have to be super, super slavish and exact. I want to be, whoops, come back here. Sorry, dropped my brush. And I'm going to mix myself. I'm going to see that I'm going to need more of my mixture because it's getting soaked into the board. So I'm mixing a bunch more of this. Excuse me. So essentially, the perline maroon is a red and the Viridian is a green, so they're complements. And they're both a relatively dark tube color. So they make a dark neutral of the red and green sort. Let's see. And I'll also use this kind of thing to draw over my lines, because I can paint over. So I'm just going to put in my darks and put in some guidelines and draw and reinforce some of my lines. What I'm not doing right now, though, is painting over my yellows, because the yellow tulips are going to be more brilliant if I can leave some of that transparent. So I'm going to try to do that. All right. So this just gives me a little bit of a guideline, a little structure. There we go. And I don't mind if I if I leave a little bit of dry brush edge here, it's got a little bit of dry brush there, kind of ragged. If I want to express a little bit of a lighter value, I can do this. I can use sort of a dry brush. I don't have as much paint on the brush, and I can do this. So I can just lightly use less pressure and express that there's sort of a halftone value and not such a dark value like that. And all of this can get painted over and finessed later. And I can use that dry brush too to draw in other details if I want. Okay, a little bit more over here. But because it's an opaque medium, there isn't really a order of way of doing things necessarily. You might hear differently from other instructors. They might have a routine that they want you to stick to. But once again, like I said on the first class, there's no governing body for gouache. There's no gouache association making the rules and criticizing you if you don't follow them. So that's kind of a great thing. So you can play around with your brush too for you guys and experiment with the marks that you can make. Can you make a sharp, can you make a line with the side of your brush? Can you do a little bit of dry brush to express a mid value rather than the darkest value? So that's sort of like drawing with charcoal a little bit. Same idea. So I can do this, and then those brush strokes can become part of my painting later on if I leave them, or I can paint over them down the road. Okay. So now I'm going to mix a lighter green, like these areas here, more of a yellow green. And I'm going to leave it a little bit transparent since I have a white board. It's not going to be completely opaque. And with being a yellow-green, it can be difficult to get yellow to be super opaque. Generally, if you add white to a color, it will increase its opacity. And so, but I'm not planning to add white to this necessarily. So I'm using some Viridian and some of this cadmium yellow light. And you can see that this is pretty intense spring green.
Did you rinse your brush before you start that?
Yeah, when I came from here, I rinsed it. I'm sorry you can't see my bucket.
Yeah, I just think I was looking at my
No, yeah, but you can, and it would be great if I can move over here, then you can see my bucket.
Oh, it's okay.
Well, I know, but it would be interesting for you. But see, now you only see the edge of it. It's not really super helpful. And here's my paper towel here. But it would be great if you could see the bucket because it is important. It is an important question, right? Now I'm rinsing my brush again here. There's my bucket, and there's my brush. There's my paper towel. And so I've got this going, and it's too intense. So I'm looking at my photo and going, the greens I'm seeing have a little bit more of a yellow-orange look to them. So I'm going to add a little bit of cadmium orange to this. And I'm just taking a little bit, and I might even dump some here. I'm dumping a little bit off there. And now I'm going to mix in what was on my brush and look at my photo and go, And I can come over here and I make it, so I have two mixtures here, right? I've got a little bit more orange and I've got this green that I mixed. And I haven't mixed a whole lot, so I'm probably going to have to mix more in order to cover areas that I want to cover. And this is one of my flaws. So this is one of my painting flaws. I don't mix enough paint. So
Me too.
Right. So then I have to take time. So if I'm in, for instance, when I teach portraiture, we're in a 3-hour model session. So if I'm in a model session and I want to get as much done as I can, as quickly as I can, this is a flaw because I have to mix more paint then, and it takes time. Here, it's not such a big deal. I'm not necessarily on the clock. And so, if it takes me a few more seconds to mix some more color, that's not a big deal. So I can come here and I'm going to go over. So this is dry. This is all dry now. Mostly, there's a little bit of wet here. But all of this dry brush stuff, that's all dried now. So now if I have a light touch, I can come over it here. Now, what I don't want to do is scrub a lot. So if I come over, it's my paint is transparent. You can kind of see that here in this image. You can see that my paint is transparent. And so I just dropped it quickly. Mirror you, I got this tracing paper here. Dropped it quickly over so that you can see through it and you see the marks that I made before with the dark paint.
You said that your brush is pretty dry.
Well, this paint is pretty watery. So
yeah, I thought
right. This paint is watery. So I am picking up a full brush full of this.
Okay.
Right. And then I'm going to put it here, right on this next leaf here. Right. And I'm going to pull this out here. And, these areas here that I'm looking down here at my photo, there's little areas of light. I'm just going there. Now I'm looking back at my photo. This is a yellow tulip. Don't want to go there. There's a little bit of a leaf here. I can go. So I'm basically layering my paint, right? I'm going over this dark in areas with this transparent green. I was going to show you how to do this like all with opaque paint, but I don't really paint that way. So now I'm going to come over here on this leaf and I'm dropping this over. And I don't have to be very exact. What's important though is that I'm not rubby scrubbing it, and I'm not like that would be what we call overworking it. So I hit this light bit here, this little light. I can always go back with an opaque paint and put this little stem in, that we can see here. There's these little streaks and stems. I can put them in later too. So if I don't get it exactly right at this point, it's not important. So I'm coming back, over this light area here at the base of this tulip. So I just showed you, I didn't really mean to do this, but I can't help it. I just showed you how to glaze with gouache. So we've got a darker color with some brush strokey detail, and we just went over it a little bit in these areas with a watery, transparent mixture that affected it. It affected these areas. So that's actually glazing. Uh-oh, too much cadmium orange. Whoops. So now I'm rinsing my brush. So I was trying to mix a little bit more of this green, and I dumped a little too much cadmium orange in there. So I'm going to just mix a little bit more of this so that I can put this leaf in, right? Add some cadmium orange, maybe a little bit more yellow, a little too intense, a little. So I'm adding water to this to make it more transparent. So right now I'm using it like transparent watercolor. All right, and now I'm going to put this in here. There. And this is a little light. I'm like, oh, well, that looks, So I'm coming over here to my now dry puddle here. This is dry, this dark. I'm going to pick up some of this dark here, re-wetting it, reactivating it so that I can make this. I'm going, oh, well, I'm just going to, come in here and put in some of this darker value green there. And I can do this to use this and make some more nuances. I'm going to go, okay, so a little bit darker there, a little bit darker here. So I'm coming over now what I just put down, my yellow green, and I'm making further adjustments, right? I'm going, oh, a little darker here, you know. I was going to keep this really simple, but this is how I paint. So let's see. All right, so now we sort of have our greens in, except for this leaf, and I'm not that crazy about that leaf, but I'm going to put it's sort of forms a pale green blob, but I am going to use my pale green here, this transparent mixture, and I am going to just go ahead and put it in. So I'm putting this in sort of a pale yellow, just like that. And because I can see how it's sort of rendered at the edges, the way it curves right here, it's curving back. I'm just taking some of this and I'm going to soften this edge here like that. There. I can mess with that more later, but at least it's there. So now we have yellow tulips and we have red tulips and we have sort of a more yellow stem here to this yellow tulip. Maybe a little bit more like these. But it's a little bit more cadmium yellow here in these spots on these stems. So I'm going to go ahead and because I don't like this white right here, it's kind of sticking out to me visually. So I want to put a little bit more color indication there. Let's see. So I picked up some yellow here. I'm looking at it going, I need to make it more not so intense and a little bit more orange. So here I've got my cadmium orange. Be careful. It is strong and powerful. So I'm going, maybe I've got too much on there. Just gonna kind of try to get some off my brush and put it here. Got some paint on me. Paint on my handle. Paint on my hand. Gonna get on everything. Not what we need. All right. So sort of cadmium orange with a little yellow here, drop that in. Woo, okay, that's really pretty bright. Not to worry, all right, because I can always dirty this up. So this is an orange. You guys are aware of the color wheel, right? So you have a familiarity with the color wheel? Okay, because I never want to talk down to people. Hang on. I've got this, I managed to get phthalo blue on my handle. It's going to travel all over the place if I don't wipe it off. See, I've got it all over my hands here. I'm like, uh-oh, danger zone. There we go. Okay. So I put this down and it's a little bit, cadmium. And so orange is neutralized by blue, and blue is in this dark mixture. Basically, when we mix the complements across the color wheel, we wind up with various neutrals, but mostly brownish neutrals. And so often we can darken our colors with a neutral rather than thinking about, I really need blue here, right? Well, this green color here has blue in it, and it also has yellow in it, and it also has some red in it, and all of those colors are in this shadow here. So I'm just going to use that to neutralize it and darken it on the one side like it is in the photo. Good enough. And if I want to get particular, I can do it later. All right, so yellow tulips, yellow tulips there, and there. Now, this is sort of a little bit peachy orangey yellow. Maybe not absolutely cadmium lemon yellow or cadmium yellow pale. So pretty much, let's see, yellow plus maybe just a little bit of orange again. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm still working transparently. You notice I haven't added any white to anything. And I don't usually think about whether I'm working transparently or opaquely. Basically, the opacity can come later. So I also have some of this. Did I have you get quinacridone? Yes.
Yeah.
Quinacridone here. So it's pink, right? And it's just right here. And I'm going to add some of this to this mixture and see if I like it for these tulips. And so this brings up something that I did want to talk about. I'm just looking to see how I'll approach these yellow tulips here. We can see many more values than a camera. So we see a lot more than my camera here that I'm using. This is a Nikon digital SLR. It's a pretty nice camera, although it's not getting a whole lot of light here apparently to show you guys good images. But we see so many more values and so much more color than a camera can. And we can't always mix everything that we see. We can't always mix everything that's on a photo, like this print. And if we're painting from life, we especially can't always express everything, exactly mix everything that we see when we're painting from life. And so we have to sometimes make approximations. And there are a lot of reasons for that. So for instance, here, this photo is printed using inks rather than using pigments. So we have a different system in painting than we do for printing. And so we may or may not be able to paint everything. And we may especially not be able to paint everything or mix every color with the palette that we have. And sometimes if we're going to get really particular about mixing the colors that we have in a photo, then we might have to go out and get another tube color that will actually give us exactly what we're looking for. And then there may not even be that. That may not even exist. So just giving you, so when we're trying to mix color and we're trying to approximate color, we're usually mixing an impression or an expression of what we see. So whether it's in a photo or whether it's in life, we may not be able to mix everything exactly. And in fact, letting go of that exactness can be helpful, especially if you're painting from life. So we're just trying to express what we see. So I'm going to use this mixture, and I've got a little bit more cadmium orange in here, and lay in and see. So this looks really pale to me compared to that. I'm like, oh, that's a little pale. So I'll pick up a little bit more cadmium orange there. It's a little bit more powerful. You can see in the shadow areas of these yellow tulips, it's orangey. And I'm still using the white of the board instead of using white paint. We're going to talk about that more here in a minute too. So I'm still painting like I'm painting a watercolor. And I'm going to talk about why here in a second. So again, I'm going to I'm drawing in my details of my tulip with this orange, and I'm using sort of a dry brush to put in the halftones. And up here and here. And over here, let's see, that darker, more intense. So I'm stealing a little bit from watercolor technique. And now this, I've gone in here, really, it's going to dry super quickly. This is going to dry really quickly. And then I'm going to take more of a yellow mixture mixed with cadmium orange a little bit just to warm it up a little. Maybe even with some of that pink, I don't know, playing around with that pink. Trying to find the happy medium here. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and paint over what I put down because this is pretty much dry. There we go. So this is basically what I consider to be sort of a lay-in. I'm approximating the colors. We do the same thing in my portrait class. We get the values in, we start to approximate the colors. We lay in really pretty transparently initially. Part of it is that, you're not going in with a whole bunch of thick paint initially. And then over here, our other yellow.
Oh.
There we go. And now I'm going to go and put in my red tulips. So I can go, so far I've gone dark first. I put in my shadows first, including on these tulips, yellow tulips. And then I went over them with a lighter wash. This time I'm going to do it the other way around. I'm going to take cadmium or red. I can do it either way. I'm just showing you a different way to do it. I've got cadmium red. I'm mixing it a little bit transparently again, kind of in the spirit of what we've been doing. So there's a tulip right here. I'm going to put that in. Let's see. I think that this paint can be thicker. I'm looking. So I put this in, but this is much darker. I'm going, okay, that's not surprising since I'm using this lightly. So here we go. So I'm going to just drop this in here. So this is doing it the other direction. We're going in with light, and then we're going to go in over that with dark. And then I'm going to put it in here on this other tulip. All right. So now I have red blobs. And so you notice as it dries, it is getting less intense, just like watercolor does. So I can come in and go, don't do that. Here, I'm going to put a little bit more pigment in here. Don't go away. Whoops, picked up too much water there. Okay. So don't leave. I'm adding some pigment to this because it just got too washed out. And I'm going to add some here too. There we go. All right, so now I have red blobs. So now I can mix a color like a dark red for these shadow areas on the tulips, right? Like I did here for the green. I'm just doing it the other direction. And I can use this green here to do that, because green is a complement of red. So I'm kind of reactivating this dark green that we used here, right? And I'm going to use this perline maroon to begin with because it's a dark red. It might even be just the ticket for some of our shadow areas here. I've got a little bit of green in there, but see, the perline maroon is already a neutralized dark red compared to the cadmium red. So it comes in the tube and it comes fully formed. And then I can take cadmium red and I can mix it with this perline to different degrees to get different amounts of dark red for this. So let's see. So I'm starting with my cadmium red and perline red mixture here. And I'm doing kind of the same thing I did in here on the leaves, where I'm looking at my photo. I'm going, okay, this is about here. That's about there. There's a petal here and here. And then this gets sort of gradates towards the light. And then this petal is darker. And I'm sort of simplifying things and saying, well, sort of ballparking these forms, right, with really roughly about maybe 3 values. A darker value, a mid value, and a light value, basically. And in this case, I'm basically using about 2 values. So coming up here to do the same thing on this tulip. There. And here. There. Just going to pop it out away from this yellow tulip that's in front. So looking at my, there, I'm using some dry brush to sort of sculpt it a little bit. A little dry brush. And then this guy over here is really just a little thing in the corner. I'm just gonna, there. So by using this green that we use for the darks, we start to have more unity in our color because our eye can tell that there's some of this dark green in this red mixture, this darker red mixture, and it creates unity in our color scheme. And so that's helpful. All right, now I want to put in the background. And on this print, the background looks sort of like a pale blue violet. And I can stick with that because I'm lazy. So I'm lazy right now and I'm going to stick with that. But I can also change it if I wanted. I could go, I don't like that. I'm going to make it something else. And we'll play around with that too. Once I get the initial color down, we can make changes. We can make changes to, we can change the background color. And I want to show you how to do that. It's a little bit of work. So I have a pile of white here that was dry. And it's still mostly dry. I mean, I had water sitting on it, but you know, the different tube colors being different in their contents, you know, what makes them up, they vary in how they behave. And so white can be particularly slow at taking up the water. So this happens to me a lot. I wind up, you know, having to put down some more white. Oh, there we go. Putting down some more white so that I can mix this color. And this is a bigger area, and so I'm putting down even more, a little bit even more white. It's because it's going to be faster for me to mix this from the tube rather than mess around with that pile of dried paint. And the thing is that the dried paint can work if I'm doing detail work. It can be enough paint. You know, I can get enough paint off of that to do detail work, but not enough to cover this background. So I'm adding water to my white to make it a brushable quality. And so here, like I watched a few YouTube videos of people teaching gouache, you know, little gouache projects, and they make a big point about the consistency that you want gouache to be. And they talk about, oh, heavy cream and all that. And I'm going, yeah, you know, that's pretty limited. But in this situation where I'm putting down this background, I can go with what we did here with transparent paint if I wanted, but I really want to have more of a flatter quality to the background. And so I'm going to mix more paint with my big 1-inch brush and make a bigger puddle so that I can cover this. And it's going to be opaque because it has white in it, and it's mostly consists of white. And the white is one of the more opaque paints. So even if I take this white and I put it down over here on the edge margin of my board, then you can see that it's, you can't see on mine, but you can see on yours that it's somewhat, it's pretty opaque and it has an opaquing quality. And that's true in any paint medium. So let's see, bluish, violet, kind of, okay, but neutralized. So I'm going to grab some of this ultramarine blue, and I'm just going to get a little corner of my brush in the ultramarine blue. And I'll probably need to go get more, but I'm going to take this a step at a time. And even though I put out more ultramarine blue on my palette, it's already drying on my palette. So I don't want it to be just plain ultramarine blue. I want it to be more interesting than that. And so I'm going to add some of this perline maroon, just a little corner of it. I'm kind of dipping and messing up my pile of perline maroon, but I'm kind of dipping into it with a corner of my brush and bringing it over here to make a neutralized violet with the ultramarine blue, because the perline's already neutral. And I'm looking over there at my picture, and you know, it can depend on how close to my picture I feel like I need to be. So then I can take this over here and go, is that what I want? And I'm going to put it down. And I might give it a few minutes to let it dry because I've got a bigger puddle and I've got more paint on my brush and I've got a bigger brush, so there's more liquid. This is going to take longer to dry than the stuff we did here. And it actually looks pretty close to that. If that's my target, it looks pretty close without me doing much of anything else to it. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to go ahead and paint it in using my 1-inch brush. So I'm going, okay, I don't have to worry too much because being opaque paint, I can paint over any mistakes that I make for the most part. And I'm also not too worried about my outer edge because this masterpiece would eventually just be framed. And so the frame would come up to here and it would cover this messy edge. And I even will intentionally paint over the edge so that I have some extra painted around the edge. So I don't really worry about hewing to my outer edge very closely. I don't tape my edges either, because if I want to make a change down the road, I'm in the middle of the painting and I go, oh my God, this painting will be so much better if I had an extra half an inch over on this side. Well, then if I have taped it, I have a hard edge where the tape has been, the paint has come up to that edge, and I pull that tape off, there's this little hard ridge that I can't get rid of. So by taping the edge, I destroy my options. When you need to add more water to get the paint to flow, go ahead and do that. I'm doing that right now, adding some water. I like to keep my options open when I'm painting a painting. And so I have all this board around here, and if I needed to expand my painting because it would be better, and I decide it would be better, and I have that option. So I'm just coming here up to the edge of things, not worrying too much. If I muff it, it's not too bad, not too big of a deal. Can always fix it. Using the edge of my brush to come into these little crannies there, because I don't feel like changing my brush just for this. No. So this is basically a lay-in. You can work this paint because it's opaque and we're using this big brush. You can work it if you need to. You can go, oh, I'm going to just work it, but it's going to be drying at different rates, and you're going to see how much darker it gets as it dries. And this is where, when you put in this kind of a layer of paint on the background, or an area, not always the background of your painting, this is where it'll take a little bit of time to dry, and you can actually see it dry, and it'll soak into, because you've got more liquid in your brush, it'll soak into the board. And so it just takes a little bit longer for it to dry, and you need to give it that time. You can go work on other areas of the painting while this is drying, excuse me, while you make judgments about it. But you don't want to make any judgments until it's dry because you can't see what color it is. So here you can see how the lighter paint now it has darker patches where it's drying. So that's our lay-in for today. Let's see. So things that I can do to this, things that I intend to do to it. I can paint in, I'm going to bring this photo down a little bit more. There we go. So I can paint into these light areas with lighter paint. I can finesse with more intense color. You know, some of these areas on the tulips, I can use more intense color. I can sharpen up edges, you know, lighten and darken. These are things that we're going to be doing to this piece probably next week. You can go ahead and transfer the black lady, the black young lady. I know, Lauren, you already did that. For next week too, I don't know how far we'll get with that, but so next week what I want to do is do some more finessey work on this, show you how we can make changes, change the color of the background if we want, right? So I'm going to mess this piece up a little bit in areas by changing the background and show you how you can, you know, how to lay over an area or soak it up. Come in with lighter and darker bits here to finesse this more. So that's my intention for next week. But this week, I already showed you how to work transparently in a lay-in, how to glaze over, you know, how to come in with lights first and then dark, and how to come in with darks first and then light over. So those are two techniques. I haven't really seen most of the people online that I've seen, and I haven't done an exhaustive research at all. They are using the paint like this background paint. It's really, it's thicker, it's creamier, and they emphasize the opacity. I approach it, I use, you know, all the tools available to me. And sometimes now with, if you have the white of the paper showing through like you do here on this particular tulip on my piece, sometimes that can be more brilliant than painting with opaques. And that's the whole idea behind transparent watercolor, is that the light shining through the transparent paint creates more brilliance than using opaque paint. So sometimes you can use that whole idea to your advantage with gouache because you can paint with it transparently or opaquely. So any questions today? Any confusion?
I don't think so. So for the like for the yellow tulip, so if it's a lighter color, you'll start with the darks first, like you did on the yellow, and then the it's darker color, you'll start with the lights first and then make it darker. Is that right?
There's not necessarily any hard rule to this. I did it, you can do it either way, whatever makes sense to you. So when I was working with the greens, right, and I started with the darks, because I wanted to get a sense of the values in this photo, right? So I was like, okay, first I'm going to start by establishing my values, and probably I should have talked more about that. I wasn't really thinking. Sometimes I don't think. You know, basically, I want to get an idea and approximate the values in here of the photo. And I want to compare the values that I can get with the photo. So when I'm looking at my photo, which is printed on coated paper, so the colors, the values are darker than if you print it on regular printer paper. And so this has probably maybe more bright vibrancy than your photo if you printed it on regular printer paper on your printer. So these values are actually darker than what I've got here on my painting. I mean, they're close enough. I see in your image here on Zoom that they look pretty close, but in real life, I can see that this is darker. And in gouache, we can only get so dark in gouache. And I explained that in the first class, right? Because it's matte And it's just the nature of it that it doesn't get as dark and black as, for instance, oil paint can. So I wanted to establish my values first, and that's why I went in with darks first, and I sort of reinforced my drawing. And then here on this tulip, I went in with darks again too, but over here I did the opposite. So you can work either way, whatever's comfortable for you, but it's always a good idea to put your values in so you have an idea of how dark how dark can you make your paint, right? For this. What is your darkest dark on the photo? And can you approximate that with your paint? So that's actually why I did that.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm not saying there's not necessarily any hard and fast rule about coming in with lights on the light, coming with the darks on the lights and coming in with, lights on the darks. It's not, there's no fast rule about it. And it could be that, again, I haven't really canvassed other people who paint in gouache, and I haven't seen all the videos. It could be that other people don't paint the way I paint. That could very well be. Because again, like I said, we don't have any gouache association where we all compare notes and there's only one way to do things. So that's an advantage and it's a disadvantage. You might, take a workshop or a class from other people who paint with gouache, and they might show you a different method and emphasize something completely different. So, and that would be confusing, but also on the other hand, it's pretty cool, right? So you can get all this different input. So any other questions right now? So your homework is to trace the black lady. We're going to come back and do some more stuff to this. And I'm going to play around with my lights and my camera some more. And I'm going to play around with sending you guys a link. But what I'll do is I'll send you guys a link on the morning of the class regardless, so that you at least have a link. And you can tell me if you get the link that I'm scheduling through Zoom. And I'm gonna experiment with our computers here and see if we can get it to happen, here at my house. Try to figure that out, because it'll be convenient if I can schedule it ahead. And I guess at OSA, they're going to want us to use their Zoom account. I'm using my own Zoom account here. They're going to want us to use their Zoom account. So then I have to figure out how to schedule ahead on their Zoom account, So that's going to be its own thing next term, not this term. So I will see you ladies next week.
Yeah.
Okay. And we'll do more, and I'll have the black lady transferred to my other piece of board, so that if we can get to a certain point on this piece, then we'll just move on to the black lady.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
It's been a pleasure, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Good week.